In this recording, we're going to take our discussion of international trade further, and we're going to discuss Heckscher-Ullin theory in this part of the recording. And the reference is Salvatore chapter 5. See, we have already seen that what is the basis for trade, and we have seen in our earlier recordings that particularly it was because of difference in the relative commodity prices. Now what we're going to see is that why there is a difference in relative commodity prices. Okay, so this is what we're going to discuss in this particular recording, that why a relative price is different, right? And the second thing which we want to discuss is basically that what is the effect of the international trade on two things. One, on the earnings of labor, okay, and second, why is there international differences in earnings? So why is that labor in one country is earning more than labor in the other country, right? Let's talk about the different assumptions of Heckscher-Ullin theory. The first assumption says that there are two nations, two commodities, and two factors of production. Okay, there are two nations, nation 1, nation 2, two commodities X and Y, and two factors of production, capital and labor. Okay. Second assumption is that both nations, they're using the same technology in production. Okay, so there is a general technology which is available, and both nations have an access to and use that technology. So basically, in case of the factor prices are same in both the nations, then producers in both of these nations are going to use exactly the same amount of labor and capital in the production process of each commodity. But what may happen is that nation 1 may have more of labor, nation 1 may have a cheaper labor than capital, and nation 2 will have a cheaper capital than labor. So nation would be using definitely for a commodity whose relative price is cheaper, a factor whose relative price is cheaper, right? So if factor price is same, so there are two conditions here. Factor prices, if they are going to be same in both nations, then both the nations are going to use exactly the same amount of labor and capital. But in case if factor prices differ, right, in both the nations, then of course each nation is going to use a relatively cheaper factor in the nation to minimize their cost of production, definitely. So this is the another assumption which you have. Commodity X is labor intensive and commodity Y is capital intensive in both nations. So that's one thing which we are assuming here again, that commodity X is labor intensive and commodity Y is capital intensive in both nations. So what does this mean? That if you look at commodity X, it is using more of labor than capital in both nations. So L by K ratio is higher, that is amount of labor upon amount of capital is higher for X than Y. Okay, in both nations. In both nations, right? In both nations at the same relative factor prices. So what you are trying to say is that